Today in the Daily Dose, the explorers. Leif Erikson. Born in 970 AD Iceland, the second of three sons of famed Viking explorer Eric the Red, Leif Erikson grew up in Greenland after his father's expulsion from Iceland in 980 AD. Earning the nickname Leif the Lucky due to his sailing prowess and miraculous survival through perilous storms at sea. Much of what we know about Erikson's 1000 AD voyage to the New World comes from 13th century Icelandic sagas, including Eric's saga, where he sailed to the Hebrides before siring his son Thorgils, the result of a love affair with the daughter of a local chief. After converting to Christianity during a lengthy stay in Norway, Erikson was sent back to Greenland by King Olaf I, with orders to spread the good word among Greenlanders. In the saga, Erikson sailed off course on his return trip to Greenland, landing in North America at a place he called Vinland due to its fertile soil and abundance of wild grapes. A much more widely accepted account comes from the Grönländiga saga, which recounts how Erikson heard about North America from Icelandic trader Bjarni Herjolfsson, who sighted North America 14 years before Erikson's voyage, although Herjolfsson never set foot on the North American continent. The saga also claims that Erikson made 3 landfalls, possibly Labrador and southern Newfoundland, before establishing his settlement at Vinland, which many believe to be the northernmost tip of Newfoundland. In a foreshadow of the violence to come, Erikson, and on a later Norse expedition to Vinland by his brother Thorvald, both groups of explorers experienced bitter clashes with Native Americans, leading to Thorvald's death in battle that ended all Viking attempts to settle in North America. After his return to Greenland, never to set foot in North America again, his father resisted his son's attempts at Christian conversion, although Erikson's mother, Johald, converted to the faith before building Greenland's first Christian church at Brattahlid. Beginning in the late 1800s, many Scandinavian Americans began to celebrate Erikson as the first European explorer to discover North America, while in 1925, President Calvin Coolidge proclaimed in a speech to a mostly Scandinavian audience in Minnesota that Erikson had been the first European to discover the Americas, while in September of 1964, President Lyndon Baines Johnson declared October 9th to be Leif Erikson Day, making Leif Erikson an early maritime standout many centuries before the age of exploration. Marco Polo. Born in 1254 Venice, Italy, Marco Polo learned the mercantile trade from his father and uncle, Nicola and Maffeo, who first met 15-year-old Marco in 1269, after an equally long journey into Asia, where the two traders met Yuan dynasty Mongol Emperor Kublai Khan. Nicola and Maffeo's return to Venice was in response to Kublai Khan's request to bring back oil from the lamp of Jerusalem, as well as a written request to the Pope in Rome, seeking 100 Christians acquainted with the 7 arts, which comprised grammar, rhetoric, logic, geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. Soon after their reunion, Marco joined his father and uncle on an epic journey back to Asia, following the Silk Road into China, where in 1272 they were received yet again by the royal court of Kublai Khan. The emperor was taken by Marco's intelligence and humility, appointing the young man to serve as Khan's foreign emissary. In response, Marco was sent out on diplomatic missions throughout the Asian continent, including present-day Burma, India, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam, as well as extensive travels through China that went on for 17 years. Sometime around 1291, the Polos accompanied 17-year-old Mongol Princess Kokachin on a wedding voyage to Persia, a journey involving 600 men and women. By the time of their arrival, only 18 in the wedding party remained alive, including the princes and the Polos. When the Polos returned home after a 24-year absence, Marco was captured and thrown in prison due to a war between Venice and Genoa, where his cellmate was the popular romance novelist Rustichello da Pisa, who dictated Marco's adventures in the Orient. Marco published his wildly popular The Travels of Marco Polo upon his release from prison in 1299, and while the book has been criticized as dramatically embellished by Rustichello, the book provided Europeans with a vivid picture of the East's geography and customs, including the first Western record of porcelain, coal, gunpowder, and paper money. Marco's written account would later inspire the likes of Christopher Columbus and many other travelers, while profoundly influencing European cartography and the introduction of the Fra Mauro map. After settling in Venice, Marco became a wealthy merchant, raising 3 children with his wife Donata, before passing away in 1324 at 70 years of age. On his deathbed, Marco Polo uttered his now famous last words, "I have only told the half of what I saw." John Cabot. Born Giovanni Caboto in 1450 Genoa, John Cabot moved to Venice as a young man, where he worked the spice trade in the Levant or Eastern Mediterranean. Studying navigation and mapmaking during his merchant years, like his contemporary Christopher Columbus, Cabot became intrigued in the possibility of reaching the rich markets of Asia by sailing in a westerly direction. Moving to Valencia and later Seville, possibly due to outstanding debts, Cabot worked as a maritime engineer with varying degrees of success, moving to the British port city of Bristol in late 1495, where he worked tirelessly to convince the British Crown that a shorter route to Asia was possible by sailing a more northerly heading than the one Columbus had taken. After King Henry VII issued letters patent to Cabot and his son in 1496, Cabot set sail on a small caravel named Matthew in May of 1947 with a crew of 18, following an aborted first attempt in 1496. Making landfall in America on June 24th, the first European to do so since Leif Erikson's 11th century landfall. While the exact location of Cabot's explorations have been disputed, many pointing to southern Labrador, the island of Newfoundland, or Cape Breton Island, Cabot was the first to hoist both the English and Venetian flags on North American soil. Believing he had reached Asia's northeast coast, Cabot explored the region now known as the Cabot Strait, naming such points of interest as Cape Discovery, the island of St. John, and the Grand Banks off the east coast of Canada, where his crew caught an abundance of codfish by simply dipping baskets into the water. After his return to England, in late 1497, Cabot set sail on a second expedition in February of 1498, this time with 5 ships and 300 men, with plans to continue westward past his original landfalls, with an expectation of reaching Japan. While one caravel was forced to land in Ireland due to storm damage, many historians believe that Cabot and his remaining crew perished in a severe storm, while some evidence suggests that Cabot and his crew may have lived out their lives in North America. Other documents suggest that he and his crew quietly returned to England amongst precious little fanfare. What is known is that Cabot's proof of a shorter route to the New World was the spark of discovery behind Britain's future land claims in Canada, as well as the establishment of Britain's 13 colonies in North America, making John Cabot an influential figure during the Age of Exploration. Christopher Columbus and the New World. After surviving a pirate-induced shipwreck as a young merchant seaman, Christopher Columbus studied mathematics, astronomy, cartography, and navigation in Lisbon, Portugal, where he embraced the radical theory that a yet undiscovered Northwest Passage was a viable shortcut between Europe and Asia. Hungry for fame and fortune, Columbus's petitions for funding a voyage were turned down by Portugal and England until Spanish King Ferdinand of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile agreed to fund the explorer in return for 90% of whatever riches Columbus could bring home to Spain. Columbus set sail on August 3, 1492, aboard the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, making landfall in mid-October on most likely the Bahamian island of San Salvador, spending the next few months island hopping the Caribbean, a place he wrongly mistook for the East Indies. While his detailed diary entries mention everything from encountered wildlife, weather, and the shifting moods of his crew, he also noted that the local Taino people were perfect candidates for enslavement. Leaving several dozen men behind at his settlement on Hispaniola, Columbus sailed for Spain, returning to what is now the northeast coast of Haiti in September of 1493, where he found his settlement destroyed. Leaving his brothers Bartolomeo and Diego behind to rebuild his colony, Columbus would continue his fruitless search for gold and other valuables, at the same time sending 500 enslaved people to Queen Isabella in lieu of gold or other riches. Believing that any people Columbus claimed for Spain were therefore Spanish subjects, a horrified Isabella returned the explorers' gift to their native homeland. Columbus would make a third voyage to the New World in 1498, and while he failed to discover the Americas, historians now know that Viking explorer Leif Erikson made landfall in Newfoundland in the 11th century, long before Columbus reached the Caribbean. During his third voyage, Columbus enslaved many Taino Indians, forcing them to search for gold or work on his plantations, resulting in his arrest upon his return to Spain, charged with barbaric acts of torture in his governance of Hispaniola. After he was cleared of the most serious charges and stripped of his noble titles, in 1502, he persuaded the two Spanish monarchs to fund him on a fourth voyage that same year, where he made landfall in Panama, just miles from the Pacific Ocean. Returning to Spain empty-handed, Columbus passed away in 1506, yet his voyages sparked centuries of exploration and exploitation of the American continents, forever altering the makeup, history, and migrations of the New World. Francisco Pizarro. Born into poverty in 1474 Trujillo, Spain, at 36 years of age, Francisco Pizarro joined a group of 300 settlers led by Alonso de Ojeda to colonize San Sebastian in present-day Colombia. But when food stocks ran low, Ojeda left Pizarro in charge while he sailed on an urgent voyage to resupply the colony. During his absence, 200 settlers were lost to tropical heat and diseases, leaving the survivors no choice but to return to Cartagena. Undeterred by misadventure, in 1513, Pizarro joined Vasco Núñez de Balboa to found the new colony of Darien near present-day Panama, giving both explorers the distinction of becoming the first Europeans to see the Pacific Ocean from the Americas. A year later, Pedro Arias Davila replaced Balboa as governor of Castilla de Oro, and when Pizarro arrested Balboa on Davila's orders, which led to Balboa's eventual execution, Pizarro was rewarded handsomely for his loyalty to Davila, growing wealthy in his position as mayor of the newly founded town of Panama. Seeking to elevate his status as a major player in the age of exploration, Pizarro teamed up with Diego de Almagro, making 2 voyages down the west coast of South America between 1524 and 1528, the first ending in failure, while the second landed Pizarro in Peru, where he heard stories about a great ruler who reigned over the Inca Empire. Returning to Spain for a meeting with King Charles, The Spanish ruler gave Pizarro permission to claim Peru for Spain, promising Pizarro he could govern any and all lands that he conquered on his return voyage to the Americas. In 1532, Pizarro sailed with 3 of his half-brothers, Gonzalo, Hernando, and Juan Pizarro, into the Incan city of Cajamarca, where Incan leader Atahualpa was celebrating his victory over his brother Huáscar after a bloody civil war. Taking the Incan leader hostage, Atahualpa was killed in 1533 despite having paid a sizable ransom to save his life. Pizarro then conquered the city of Cuzco before founding Lima, and after relations between Almagro and Pizarro devolved into a power struggle in 1537 that ultimately led to Almagro's death, Almagro's armed supporters broke into Pizarro's Lima palace, assassinating the explorer on June 26, 1541, making the life and explorations of Francisco Pizarro a tragic downfall for the once great Inca people. Hernan Cortes. Born into low nobility in 1485 Medellin, Spain, Hernan Cortes's restlessness to explore the New World landed him in Hispaniola by the age of 19, joining Spanish conquistador Diego Velázquez 7 years later on an expedition to Cuba, where he climbed through the ranks to become the mayor or chief magistrate of Santiago. By 1518, Cortes was in command of his own expedition to Mexico, but after Velázquez canceled the trip out of enmity for his young understudy, a defiant Cortes set sail with 11 ships and 500 men, landing first in Tabasco and later Veracruz, where some accounts claim he scuttled his own ships, so that his men had no other option but to follow Cortes on his conquest of the mighty Aztec Empire. Considered the wealthiest and most densely populated city in Mesoamerica, Cortes and his men entered Tenochtitlan on November 8, 1519, where Aztec ruler Montezuma II mistook Cortes as an envoy from the god Quetzalcoatl, who was prophesied to return that year in the Aztec calendar. Seizing upon the moment, Cortes took Montezuma hostage while his soldiers raided the city. Soon afterwards, Cortes caught wind of a Spanish armada from Cuba en route to arrest him for disobeying orders from Velázquez, escaping to sea while leaving Tenochtitlan under the command of Pedro de Alvarado. Alvarado massacred Aztec chiefs before Cortes returned to the city, igniting a rebellion by Aztec citizens that led to the murder of Montezuma and a Spanish retreat from the city. Unwilling to accept defeat, Cortes proved victorious over the Aztecs in the Battle of Otumba on July 7, 1520, regaining control of the city a year later, which brought about the downfall of the Aztec Empire. While Cortes was off conquering Mexico, Velázquez crucified the explorer back home in Spain, defaming his one-time understudy in the court of public opinion, prompting Cortes to undertake a public relations campaign in his defense, sending Spanish King Charles V a string of 5 now infamous letters detailing the lands he had conquered for Spain, as well as lurid descriptions of life in Mexico. After his return to Spain, Cortes spent much of his later years seeking recognition for his achievements as a conquistador before a skeptical royal court. Despite the bad press relating to his disobedience, he was awarded the title of Marquesada del Valle de Oaxaca before passing away from natural causes in 1547, forever cementing Hernan Cortes as a luminary figure in the age of exploration. Hernando de Soto. Dreaming of making his fortune in the New World, at 14 years of age, Hernando de Soto set sail for the West Indies in 1514 under the command of Pedro Arias de Villa, earning a small fortune during de Villa's later conquest of Panama and Nicaragua. 16 years after his departure from Seville, Spain, De Soto had become one of the leading slave traders in Nicaragua, as well as one of the wealthiest men in present-day Central America. In 1531, De Soto teamed up with Francisco Pizarro on an expedition to northwestern Colombia in pursuit of a rumored cache of gold in the region. A year later, De Soto signed on as Pizarro's chief lieutenant during the explorer's conquest of Peru, defeating the Inca people at Cajamarca in November of 1532, later capturing the last Incan emperor Atahualpa before executing him in 1533, despite a large ransom payment by the Inca people to spare the emperor's life. Growing ever wealthier, when the ransom gold was divided, De Soto was later named Lieutenant Governor of Cuzco, before assisting Pizarro in the founding of Lima in 1535. A year later, De Soto returned home to Spain as one of the wealthiest conquistadors of his time, marrying Davila's daughter before accepting a royal commission as governor of Cuba, at the same time accepting the challenge of exploring and settling La Florida, which had first been explored by Juan Ponce de Leon. Sailing from Spain in April of 1538, with 10 ships and 700 men, after spending time in Cuba, De Soto landed at Tampa Bay in May of 1539, setting up his winter quarters near present-day Tallahassee. During the spring of 1540, De Soto and his men explored present-day Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee, and after no gold was discovered in the region, De Soto headed south to rendezvous with his ships near Mobile Bay, coming under attack by hostile Indians in October of that same year, which caused egregious casualties on both sides. Sighting the Mississippi River in mid-1541, the ever-ambitious De Soto traversed Arkansas and Louisiana by 1542, before passing away on May 21st of 1542 after succumbing to a fever. His unfinished expedition would be led by his successor, Luis de Moscoso Alvarado, which finally reached Mexico in 1543, with nearly half of De Soto's original body of men lost to disease, illness, and hostile attacks by Native Americans, making the exploits of Hernando de Soto some of the boldest expeditions during the Age of Exploration. And there you have it, the explorers. Today's Daily Dose documentary is brought to you by PlatosPeach.com, a lesson planning tool leveraging content like this and much more for educators and homeschooling parents. Check out the description for more information so that you too can teach something new every day.